Did we miss out on a Mario 64 too? Super Mario 64, one of the most influential video games ever made. The 1996 title was so ridiculously pioneering that it didn't just raise the bar for platformers, it obliterated it. This game was a revolution, a fully 3D polygonal platforming experience that gave players an unprecedented sense of freedom and exploration. It didn't just change gaming, it changed what we expected from games, altering the world forever. The title was a defining moment for 3D gaming and everybody knew it. As expected, with such a groundbreaking release, it was inevitable that fans would immediately start fantasizing about a sequel. While it's well known that no direct sequel on the Nintendo 64 ever hits the market, shockingly there was a time where we not only expected a follow-up, but even Shigeru Miyamoto himself confirmed they were working on one. So let's explore what we know about this mysterious, desirable game that was never to be. So with that said, I am Lady Decade. Hit that subscribe button as it's time to head down another rabbit hole, as this is the story of the lost Super Mario 64 2 that never was. So, you've done it. 70 stars were collected, Bowser was defeated and the princess was rescued. But that Mario 64 fix just wasn't enough. So you go back in, determined to explore every last nook and cranny of Peach's castle, hunting down all 120 stars, and even then, you still want more because nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever felt quite like Super Mario 64. Sure, later you'd get Banjo-Kazooie and even get Donkey Kong 64, but as great as they weren't Mario 64. They didn't have that same magic, that perfect balance of movement, freedom and exploration that made Mario's first 3D adventure so special. Mario 64 was a phenomenon. A sequel wasn't just expected, it felt inevitable, right? And as good as Mario 64 was, even on release we knew how it could be built on. This desire was not just about wanting more of the same, there were elements of Mario's world that just had to be brought into 3D. Like, where the hell was Luigi? And why couldn't we ride Yoshi instead of finding him on the roof for a, I don't know, lame reward? A Mario 64 2 could have completed the experience, filling in everything that was missing from the original that fans were desperate for. So naturally, in the 1990s, you begin scouring gaming magazines, desperately searching for any hint that there might be a sequel on the way, and soon, those first hints begin to emerge. One particular 90s magazine features a Q&A session with Dan Osen, a localization manager at Nintendo of America. When asked about the possibility of Super Mario 64 2, Osen states, Super Mario 64 2 has, in fact, already been announced, but there is no release date as of yet. Mr. Miyamoto has said that many things that didn't make it into the first game, such as Luigi and being able to ride Yoshi, will be in the sequel. So, there it was. Clear confirmation in print. The exact game that fans had been dreaming of was apparently already in development, but did it actually exist, or was this just another case of gaming journalism jumping the gun? Well, buckle up as I've got loads of juicy info coming up for you. 3D platformers might not be as common as releases from other genres, but that doesn't mean we don't get good ones worth playing from time to time. Such as A Hat in Time, for example, which, using my link, you can get for an incredible 57% cheaper than on Steam. In fact, Mario 64's influence can be felt literally everywhere, platformers or not. So get huge discounts of up to 90% off for thousands of indie, AAA, retro and modern titles, all by using my affiliate links in the pinned comment. I hope you get some great deals and enjoy the rest of this video. A further magazine article dug even deeper into the game's supposed development, offering more details on what was shaping up to be a groundbreaking sequel. The article stated, "Even though Nintendo holds most of its game development secrets tightly, the company's chief designer Shigeru Miyamoto always manages to reveal just enough to make his worldwide fans water at the mouth." Adding that, a few months back, Miyamoto disclosed a handful of facts about Super Mario 64 2 that stunned most gamers. The sequel to Super Mario 64 won't appear on cartridge, but will instead arrive on disc for the 64DD, Nintendo's upcoming add-on peripheral. The second fact Miyamoto brought us was that his development team and he were on track to make the disc game 2-player, and the second player would be none other than Mario's brother, Luigi. What more could we ask for? We suspect Super Mario 64 2 will include a gamut of benefits the first game didn't, like a greater variety of textures, more emotional facial expressions, and because of the 64DD's read-write characteristics, future add-ons will increase this sequel's longevity. Without much more of a peep since that one shining moment, Miyamoto and Nintendo have said almost nothing more about the game, with the exception of hinting that it'll arrive in mid to late 1998. But was this solid proof of Super Mario 64 2's existence, or was this just another case of 90s gaming journalism running wild with speculation and spreading fake news? Because let's be honest, magazines back then were known for talking out their arses. So was this real, or was this a load of hype with no substance? Well, let's take a look at the actual evidence. The articles we just covered didn't appear out of nowhere. They were based on comments that Shigeru Miyamoto himself had made at multiple trade events. At E3 in August 1997, Miyamoto confirmed that he had indeed just started working on Super Mario 64 2, leading to a surge of speculation and excitement. However, it was still in the early stages and a few concrete details were given. Then, at Space World 1997, he revealed that the team had not yet decided whether the sequel would be single-player or two-player, but that they were actively working on a system where Mario and Luigi could coexist in a 3D space. This reinforced the idea that multiplayer functionality was a core focus of the project. But wait, there's more. At E3 1998, Miyamoto provided an update stating that work was continuing, but there was a caveat regarding Mario 64 2. "It was left on my desk in the middle of development. It's a matter of priorities. Once we get down to working on the game, I think it will be finished fairly quickly." This suggests that development was not progressing as a priority, which might explain why no major updates were given publicly in the following months. But as time kept moving, it just seemed that priorities kept continuing to change. By November 1998, Nintendo's focus had shifted. Reports indicate that Super Mario 64 2 was being considered for Project Dolphin, the codename for what would eventually become the Nintendo GameCube. This shift meant that a proper Mario 64 sequel was unlikely to appear on the Nintendo 64 or 64DD. Then, at Space World 2000, Nintendo unveiled something else. Super Mario 128, a tech demo showcasing an experimental gameplay concept for Nintendo's upcoming next-gen console. Though it was never officially released as a standalone game, elements in Mario 128 such as its physics-based interactions and spherical level design would directly inspire later Nintendo titles like Pikmin and Super Mario Galaxy. So, while Super Mario 64 2 was never outright cancelled, it seems clear that the project quietly morphed into something else. Or simply faded away as Nintendo's priorities changed. Or did it? Well, if you know your Nintendo history or you've watched my Nintendo 64 disk drive videos in the past, you'll know that the 64DD was an absolute disaster. It wasn't just a failure, it was one of Nintendo's biggest blunders. Originally announced in 1995, the 64DD was supposed to revolutionize the Nintendo 64, offering expanded storage, online capabilities, and new gaming experiences. But there was just one problem. It kept getting delayed. After missing its original 1996 release date, it was pushed back repeatedly until it finally limped onto the market in December 1999. 3 years too late, and only in Japan. By that point, not only did nobody care, but the hardware was released primarily to support quirky art applications rather than major mainline releases. The Dreamcast was already out, the PlayStation 2 was on the horizon, and the gaming industry had moved on. Developers abandoned their 64DD exclusive projects because they couldn't afford to wait indefinitely for hardware that might never arrive. As a result, the 64DD flopped hard, shifting only 15,000 units and receiving just 10 games and software releases before Nintendo abandoned it entirely. To put that into perspective, the Virtual Boy, Nintendo's biggest meme-worthy failure, still sold close to 1 million units. The 64DD was an unmitigated disaster, and with it, many of Nintendo's ambitious projects for the add-on were either cancelled or moved elsewhere. With that in mind, what actually happened to Super Mario 64 2? Was it even real, or did development even get off the ground? Or was it just another victim of Nintendo's biggest hardware failure? By the time the 64DD finally hit shelves, even the Nintendo 64 itself was already on borrowed time. This was over 3 years after the console's launch, and with the Dreamcast leading the charge into the next generation, it was clear that the N64 had a couple of years left in its tank. So, decent software or not, the failure of the 64DD was inevitable. With the DD's impending failure by November 1998, Miyamoto was already hinting that Super Mario 64 2 might be moving to a new system. By Space World 2000, the 64DD was completely dead. In fact, Nintendo didn't even bother showcasing it at the event. Instead, they unveiled the GameCube and Game Boy Advance, making it abundantly clear they had moved on. With the writing on the wall, it became painfully clear that most planned 64DD games were never going to happen, meaning most projects fell into one of 3 categories. These consist of those games that were converted to standard N64 cartridges, games that were shifted to other platforms such as Seaman for the Dreamcast, and the ones that were scrapped completely, resulting in many ambitious ideas that tragically never saw the light of day. So with that in mind, it looks like Super Mario 64 2 was just another casualty of Nintendo's poor planning. However, there is another chapter in this tale that desperately needs to be covered, and it all but confirms Mario 64 2's existence. As a last glimmer of hope, in November 1999, just 1 month before the Nintendo 64DD's Japan-only launch, Shigeru Miyamoto made a surprising revelation stating that, for over a year now, at my desk, a prototype program of Mario and Luigi has been running on my monitor. Wait, what? Despite everything, the 64DD circling in the drain, development of Super Mario 64 2 was still happening behind the scenes, but what exactly did this prototype entail? According to Miyamoto, the game only ever had a single demo level made for it, which, let's be real, isn't exactly a lot to go on. However, he did confirm that the first major feature they were working on was multiplayer functionality, meaning that Mario and Luigi would finally be playable together in a 3D world. This wasn't the first time Miyamoto had hinted at multiplayer. Back in December 1998, he mentioned in a Nintendo Power subscriber special that we've actually been considering a 4-player game with simultaneous play, but each screen would need to be very small, and we would have to implement a new camera work. But it's these sorts of problems that I like to tackle. This suggests that Nintendo was still toying with the concept of multiplayer, even though the 64DD was a commercial disaster. By this point, however, it was clear that Super Mario 64 2 would never see the light of day on the N64 or 64DD. If it was going to happen, it would have to be on new hardware. And that brings us to 2002. Enter Mario Sunshine. If you hadn't yet died from Millennium Bug poisoning, then there's a strong chance you had got your hands on Super Mario Sunshine for the GameCube, the next 3D Mario adventure and the direct follow-up to Mario 64. At first glance, this should have been the natural successor to Super Mario 64 2, but was it really? Not exactly. Yes, Sunshine was another sandbox-style 3D Mario. It had free movements, open levels, and even featured Yoshi as a rideable companion, something that had been teased way back in the Mario 64 2 rumours. But there was one notable absence. Where the bloody hell was Luigi? At the time, this wasn't the biggest deal. After all, Luigi had just started his own solo adventure, Luigi's Mansion, where he actually got to be the hero for once, so fine. Sunshine was Mario's game, but here's the issue. Mario 64 2's entire concept revolved around co-op gameplay between Mario and Luigi. That was supposed to be the big innovation, the feature that would have separated it from its predecessor, yet when Sunshine finally launched, Luigi was nowhere to be seen. There was no multiplayer, no two-character mechanics, nothing that resembled what Miyamoto had teased back in 1999. Unused code within Sunshine suggests that a multiplayer mode may have been considered, but ultimately it was scrapped. However, all the concepts for Mario 64 2 would end up showing up somewhere else. That's right, many elements of Mario 64 2 would later resurface in Super Mario 64 DS, which, get this, included Luigi as a playable character and the full multiplayer mode we were promised. So the ideas weren't killed off but simply shelved and put in an alternative version of Mario 64. In a way, a case could be made that this is Mario 64 2, as it wasn't just a simple re-release. It had brand new levels, 150 stars to collect, and multiplayer functionality involving 4 playable characters. This aligns directly with Miyamoto's 1998 statement that he was considering a 4-player Mario game. Nintendo had been exploring the idea of a multiplayer 3D Mario for years, long before it eventually materialized in Super Mario 64 DS. The inclusion of Luigi, Yoshi and Wario as playable characters in the DS version feels less like a coincidence and more like the remnants of Super Mario 64 2 being salvaged and repurposed. But wait, there is even more. Additionally, the 2020 Giga Leak revealed a fully modelled and rigged Luigi for the original Super Mario 64, finally confirming a long-standing fan theory that Luigi was always meant to be in the original game. This leak provided undeniable proof that Nintendo had been working on multiplayer elements as early as 1996. The leak included Luigi's 3D model, unused animations and skeletal rigging, indicating that he was at one point functional. References to multiplayer functionality in the source code suggest that Super Mario 64 was originally envisioned with some kind of 2-player mode anyway. But what if I told you that there is actually a Mario 64 game for the 64 DD? So while Super Mario 64 2 never materialized, many of these concepts survived, just in a different form. That's right, back in 2014 something completely unexpected happened. A French Nintendo 64 collector known online as Jimmy130 was rummaging through a second-hand shop in Japan when he stumbled across something unusual, a Nintendo 64 DD disc with a rough cut label. The store had no idea what they had, so Jimmy130 was able to snatch it up for cheap, only to realise he had unearthed a lost piece of Nintendo history. He had found a copy of Mario 64 for the disk drive. According to RetroGamer.net, this disc was originally produced for Nintendo's Shoshinkai Show in 1996, a tech showcase meant to promote the 64DD add-on, but it was never released to the public. By the time the 64DD finally launched in 1999, releasing this version of Super Mario 64 would have been completely pointless. It was supposed to be lost to time. While this prototype wasn't drastically different from the final Super Mario 64, it had some unique quirks. The website The Cutting Room Floor documented some of the differences, including a duplicated audio table, suggesting that developers weren't concerned about optimizing 64DD disk space. A game-breaking glitch on the tiny huge island, which crashed the game, made it impossible to collect all the stars, and then there were some weird extras. Data miners found a bizarre collection of unused graphics scattered throughout the game, including a cable car from San Francisco, renders of Wario and Yoshi from Mario Kart 64, and even random pictures of an unknown Nintendo employee. Quirky stuff. So when we look at the full picture, the Super Mario 64 2 story isn't just a simple case of cancellation, it's a wild, branching tale involving a planned sequel that never materialized, a bizarre prototype buried for years, multiplayer ideas that eventually resurfaced in later games, and a lost Luigi model proving he was originally intended for Super Mario 64. And all of this is without even diving into the Mario 128 demo, a whole other rabbit hole that takes us down some very interesting paths. But I'd rather revisit that one again in another video. If you've enjoyed this murky trip through history, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and don't forget that you can get huge discounts of up to 90% on thousands of indie, AAA, retro and modern titles, all by using my affiliate links in the pinned comment. Each purchase helps support this channel, or if you want to support my work in a more personal way, access my cosplay library and more by becoming a backer over on Patreon.